Welcome to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. Barry, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Would you like to introduce yourself to everyone out there listening?
Yes, my name is Barry Krusch. I'm author of Impossible, the Case Against Lee Harvey Oswald, written in 2012.
So you think Lee Harvey's innocent?
Well, let's put it this way. I have what I call the JFK challenge in my book, and anyone who reads the book and thinks that they can dispute me before a panel of 12 arbitrators, and if they win, I'll give them $100,000.
Have you had anybody take you up on it?
No.
What do you like? Okay, so let's start with how'd you get interested into the assassination in the first place?
So, when I was a kid, Kennedy was killed, and obviously that was enormous news. And of course, back then we all thought Oswald did it. I mean, there was no alternative. There's no alternative, right? I mean, he did it. That was it. Done. And then this movie JFK came out in 1992. Oliver Stone. I don't know if you ever saw it. You got to see JFK. Very important movie. After it came out, they did they started an assassination review board, the ARRB, I think it was. So again, I'm going back 10 years when I wrote the book, but and then they reopened a lot of information, and a lot of stuff came out that had been suppressed. So all of a sudden, it was like, whoa, it's in the news again. And then there was a book by Vincent Bugliosi that came out called Reclaiming History. And I read that and I thought, this Oliver Stone is a nut, he's a conspiracy theorist, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of forgot about it. And then one night I woke up about 3 a.m. with a very interesting observation, which is how many people in history that have been assassinated were driven to their assassin. And that central observation started me on this huge journey into researching what was going on, because that struck me as incredibly implausible that they're going to drive a president to his assassin. Normally, the assassins go to the target. How often do you drive the target to the assassin? It's inherently improbable.
It's a very interesting point, because he got the job, I think, a couple of weeks before they even published it in the sudden change in a newspaper, which is the first time it's ever been done before, and they've never done it after, was published the route beforehand. But
and that route was crazy. So prior to that, maybe like 1 or 2 weeks before, they had a tape of an informant who said that Kennedy would be shot by someone from a window. And so when they first got the threat in Miami, they basically canceled the whole tour of the president. But and they knew about this. So the Secret Service knew all about this. Everyone knew about this. In the meantime, they let this thing go, and they, instead of going a straight route down the street and then cutting across and then going over the interstate ramp, they took the route and they routed it right by Oswald's building and then down with a 3-mile-per-hour hairpin turn. And if you could see the shot, the Secret Service did a shot of that turn that they made. And if Oswald could look out that window and see that, and with the scope, he was like there. I mean, if you're going to shoot anyone, that's where you're going to shoot him. The guy was like right there. Didn't take a shot. Instead, what happened was the car went and went and went, and finally it went behind some trees. And that's where supposedly Oswald fired, through trees, with a scope that was defective. So when the FBI tried to redo the shot, they couldn't do it because the scope was misaligned. So if Oswald had actually sighted the president correctly through the scope, he would have missed.
So did you look into the actual investigation to see what else they kind of blended or covered up, or did you look more into Oswald's life to get a better understanding of who this guy was and, trying to understand could it be possible that he took a shot at all? I'm still in that middle ground, and I know people kind of I've listened to the Lone Nutters and I've listened to I believe some of the conspiracy theories, but I don't at the same time. There are some things like I've got Blakey to admit on the show, and I asked him 6, 7 times if Oswald was intelligence. And he would say, yeah. And then he would go into the Warren Commission, painted him out to be this loner. And obviously, we know through documents it wasn't true. And people say, well, he was just saying yes to your question. He wasn't, actually answering you. And I go, okay. Well, if somebody called you racist, are you going to say yeah and then speculate all the ways that you're racist? It doesn't make sense. He was speculating Oswald was intelligence, but how were they using him?
Well, there's documentation about that, and he had been trained to speak the Russian language in a military language institute. I think it was in Monterey, California. So, how many people are trained by the military to learn Russian to that level, unless they're doing it for a mission?
And be a part of a defector program and
Be
also
part of a defective program.
get gonorrhea at a place in Atsugi. I mean, there was just so much about his profile that didn't make sense to me, but the official story was he was a loner, and then you see photos of him and his family, and you just start going, "This just seemed like a."
Well, there's no evidence he was at the window. A lot of evidence he wasn't at the window. Um, and furthermore, the shot that killed the president came from the front. So whether he was at the window or not, it's completely irrelevant. Um, whether he was at the window or not, because that shot wasn't by anyone in that building.
Well, so that if he was drove to his killer, basically, JFK, then do you think that the plan was a couple weeks before, like maybe around the time Oswald got the
Oh, this
job
thing had
there?
been in the works for years. Yeah. For example, the Texas School Book Depository was owned by D.H. Byrd, who was one of the best friends of Lyndon Johnson. Okay, so why would they put the books all the way on the top of the 6th floor of the School Book Depository? That's a really bad place to put books. If you're going to be moving books back and forth, you're going to put them on the bottom floors. You're not going to haul them up and down an elevator. But the books were there to provide cover. And also because his fingerprints now could be all over these cases. So you could say, oh, wow, look at his fingerprints are all over this. See, he was there. Well, that was his job. He was handling boxes of books. Of course, his fingerprints are going to be on it. Lots of people's fingerprints were on the books. The so-called sniper's nest that Oswald was said to have erected to block the view was actually put there by employees of the School Book Depository a couple days before. They placed that row of books in front of that window. He had nothing to do with it. So this is a very elaborate plan. I mean, the power went out in that building as the president was coming around the street. The power went out, and the radio frequencies went out. And there was an ambulance that was on the scene that was supposed to be there, an emergency ambulance. Someone actually had like a heart attack or something like 20 minutes before, and then the ambulance left. The Secret Service guys that were supposed to be on the car were pulled off of the car. There was actually a YouTube video on it. Maybe they've yanked it since then. Have you seen that video?
Yeah, where the guy throws his hands up like that.
Right, where they pulled the guy off the car?
Yeah.
So, go figure.
So, because there's a lot of secrets, and I've spoken to John Sunheim of the AARB on here. They talk about the missing files. I know they're doing a court case about it coming up because they're suing Biden, or the Mary Farrell site suing Biden about the release of records. What I started to pick up was when you start noticing, especially in the 21 release, there's documents labeled Garrison's attempts to embarrass the agency. And when an agency is thinking like that, and we think it's our government, they work for us, but the way that these agencies are thinking is like there's problems with people trying to open up an investigation into the assassination, where I start going, what are they hiding? And that was the whole thing. Was Were they scared that if Oswald's intelligence profile came out? Were they going to be worried it was going to be linked back to the CIA or the FBI? Or are they scared about the organized crime aspect of things? A lot of it didn't make sense, but if you examine the times, you start noticing it had to be Oswald. Not that he took a shot, but he had to be the guy that took the fall. Because if there was more than one shooter, it would be conspiracy. And who are people going to think? Well, they're going to want someone to be responsible. So
Well, he was the perfect fall guy. I mean, he was posing as a communist, right? So already he's a bad guy just for that. He was like sort of like a ne'er-do-well type of a profile, like the kind of guy you might think of that would do something like this. But there was two Oswalds spotted leaving that building. I don't know if you know that story. One who went into a Rambler and the other went into a bus. And lookalikes, Oswald lookalikes. I
Roger
mean, this
Craig's the one that saw the Rambler.
right. And someone else saw him going into a bus.
That's the testimony that they have, that was the bus driver. But I think the bus driver said later that he thought he was just pointing out a disruptive teen, that he wasn't clear on the fact that he was pointing out Oswald.
Yeah, well, the story is there's multiple stories, but the official story is the bus. The Rambler thing wasn't really a part of the official story, but that was what was her name? I forget. Mary. It was her Oswald's friend, her Rambler, who had been
Oh, Ruth
connected to
Payne?
Ruth Payne, who was connected to Alan Dulles.
See, that's the part that where I say, like, that's just harder because my whole thing is trying to find the more plausible aspects of things to get people onto the level of conspiracy. And then, like, even talking about Ruth Payne, I haven't even dived into Garrison really at all, because I feel like you don't necessarily need him to complete the story of just showing them, like, hey, the Warren Commission is just obvious crap. Jack Ruby's mother's dental records in there. I mean, there's a bunch of
Well,
stuff
my
in there.
my book is just on the Warren Commission. That's all it is. I don't get into any of this the stuff I'm talking to you about now.
Yeah.
I don't really mention in the book. It's really just the forensic evidence, the angles. You say there's a single bullet theory. Does it hold up when you give all the angles? All the angles have to correspond, right?
Yeah.
If you say a bullet goes through one person to another, then you've got one angle that has to work for every single forensic event that has occurred. That's what my book's about. But in the process of writing the book, obviously I'm doing all this other research about, because the story is completely harebrained. The point of my book is that no one could ever convict Oswald in a fair court. Impossible. Impossible. There's not any chance at all you can convict Oswald. And I've given $100,000 and no one has taken me up. None of the so-called, famous lone nut guys, right? John McAdams, or I went to them personally. The other guy, what was his name? Such the G. I've forgotten these names, but Bugliosi didn't want to do it.
I agree with you, but I also like I think the way that everything was going on back then, especially with media reporting, I feel like he was trial by media. I think the public began to be convinced that it was Oswald. So even if evidence did come out in court that kind of would resolve him, I just wonder if he would have gotten even a fair trial in the first
Well,
place.
I've got 1,000 pages in the book, which if this evidence, so that evidence that I have in the book was not available in 1963. Okay, so if you had a trial then, people wouldn't have seen this stuff. For example, the Zapruder film wasn't shown until like 1976. And then there's a ton of stuff that came out after 1992. So there's a bunch of these assassination books that were written prior to 1992. A lot of them had great intuitions, but they didn't have the evidence because it hadn't been released. Then there was a second wave of books that came out after 1992, and I'm part of that, where we took all that evidence that had since emerged and then said, okay, now we've actually got this stuff. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. And then the story was even more ridiculous. And the real question is why anyone believes it at all, or why anyone thinks it's plausible in the slightest. That's the question.
I've heard some people say that it's because some of the lone nutter people are like secret agents. I don't believe that, but I think it's because there is this aspect that there's a horrible thing if it was your government or if it was whoever that kind of created this long lie. I mean, history teaches the Warren Commission. They don't even take account for the HSCA, which was, in my opinion, they didn't get everything right. They were hindered in their investigation, but they proved some things wrong. I mean, they proved the Warren Commission said that Marina identified Lee's rifle, and she used to hear him reloading it on the back porch, whatever. When I had Posner on here, I showed him the HSCA volumes says she couldn't identify the difference between a rifle and a shotgun, and she didn't care what he was doing on his
The
back
thing
porch.
about it is, when you look at the forensic evidence, you don't need to worry about the witnesses, because what's the best evidence? You ever read that book by David Lifton, Best Evidence?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the best evidence? Witnesses are not good evidence, right? They're all over the map. Like on the Tippett thing, how many shots were fired? 3 shots, 4 shots, 5 shots, 8 shots. No one knows how many shots. You can't rely. And also the same thing with Kennedy. Again, all over the map. 2 shots, 3 shots. Some people said 8 shots, all over the map. So witness is just really terrible evidence. But the best evidence is the forensic evidence. Bullets and marks on a pavement and blood and this type of stuff, which when you put it all together proves that Oswald could not have committed this crime. Case in point is the shot from the front. If it's 100% certain that the shot came from the front, then it's 100% certain Oswald did not fire that shot. Right?
Yeah.
That's deductive logic. There's no point even thinking about him. No point in thinking about Oswald. The question is, where did that shot come from? That's where the attention has to go. Not what Ruth Payne said and not what this girl said or that person said. None of it counts. But if that shot came from the front, then which side in the front? That's the other thing. Now, where in the front did it come from? That's the real question. Some people say it came from the grassy knoll, but the evidence, the forensic evidence, says it actually came from the south knoll, the other side of the street. Never heard that one, did you?
I haven't heard that. I would figure if we talked about, we would have to point it back to witnesses again with the number of people that saw the smoke come from the grassy knoll, because that's where I thought the shot came from.
Oh, well, there's not saying there wasn't smoke in the grassy knoll. That's part of this thing. So they've got people coming from multiple angles. They got him from the look. If he shot from the front, and there's a shot from the back, which there were, then you know that at least 2 people are involved, and therefore you've got a conspiracy, yes. Right? So if you've got 2 people involved, what are the chances it's just going to be 2?
I think it'd be a little bit more.
If you wanted to kill the president, would you just have 2 people on this thing? Because really, you're taking a big risk there. Maybe you'd have 4 people, or maybe you'd have 5 people. And then you have people planted for various purposes to do certain things. For example, a shot fired from the grassy knoll simply to throw people off the track of the other place, to have everyone running towards that. So the other guy can go do his getaway. The actual assassin could actually go out. No one's paying attention to him. Everyone's running up the grassy knoll looking for that shot of smoke, where that doesn't make any sense from a trajectory perspective to have a shot come from there, because that wasn't the angle that this front shot went through the president's head. It went from here out here, right? So if it's that way, that's the south knoll coming back through the head. That's what my book's about.
I feel like even if you trust the forensic evidence, aren't you relying on the people that did the investigation into the first place? I mean, that's where the single bullet theory came in with Arlen Specter, and then you also got the jet effect, I think it is, with the. So everyone, if you watch the Zapruder film, you see the president's head go back into the left, but then you see they just said, "Oh, it's a jet theory." So then it's being manipulated there, and more people trust the government.
No, but that's not the key evidence. The key evidence is the way that president's head was blown out. So when you fire, if you took a watermelon, okay, and you fire a bullet into a watermelon, the entry point of the watermelon is going to be a small hole. The exit point is going to be a big blowout, right? We're talking about laws of physics, and you can do this experiment over and over again. President's head blew out from the back.
Yes.
And there are 22 photographs of witnesses that were in Parkland and that were at Bethesda. And they all have this. And there's a drawing by Dr. McClellan of the way this thing actually looked. And there's a blowout in the back. So if there's a blowout in the back, that means the shot's from the front. And therefore, if it's on the right side over here, that means most likely it came from the left side over there.
Again, going back to the witnesses, you can trust the witnesses. On some of them, you can.
Well, they all said the same thing.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that there's
in two separate institutions, that there was a big blowout from the back. That's not consistent with a shot from the back.
There's 60 something people that saw smoke from the grassy knoll, and there's a number of people that drew drawings of a back hole explosion, a little square thing. Even Clint Hill, until recently, Clint Hill changed his opinion. I'm guessing because he's writing another book. He said he never saw the back hole when he popped up on the back of the limo. But that's what you have to go off of at this point. I mean, you can
there was smoke. There was smoke on the grassy knoll. I believe that. That doesn't mean the shot that killed the president was fired from there.
No, what I'm saying is that the witnesses are reliable in the fact that it can prove a lot of the cover-up investigation aspects of either the Warren Commission or whoever else was trying.
There's also another thing, is a shot through the windshield.
Yeah, the bullet
through the windshield. So it didn't come on that side. It came on the other side. It came on the left side. So everything is actually consistent with a shot from the South Knoll in terms of trajectories, and inconsistent with a shot coming from the grassy knoll. Don't forget, he was shot in the throat. Okay. Yeah. So remember, he holds his hand up in the Zapruder film. So you've got to account for, you got a lot of shots going on. By the way, the shot in the back and the shot in the front did not exit the president's body. Okay. So the shot in the back went in, and they call it a short shot. So the way this works is, whoever planned this thing wanted to make sure that these bullets could then be traced to Oswald's rifle and pulled out of his body, stayed there. Because remember, we're talking about full metal jacket bullets. They are not supposed to stay in the body.
Yeah.
They're designed to pass through the body. And in fact, the single bullet theory says, yeah, it's a full metal jacket. It passed through the body. Well, great. Except the one that hit in the back and the one in the neck did not pass through the body.
I'm surprised more people didn't raise hell when the single bullet theory came out.
Well, I mean, don't forget, back then, it's even worse than today. So I won't mention any particular names of particular things, but in the last 2 years, there's been this huge media cover-up of all kinds of stuff going on. And back then, it was even worse. So you had your CBS, your NBC, ABC, your Life magazine, and your Wall Street Journal, and they're all broadcasting the same message. Okay, every publication, Walter Cronkite, Huntley Brinkley, it's all the same message over and over again. People could not see outside this thing. However, there were alternative views presented, and where were they presented? On the front page of the National Enquirer. So you would go into a store, a grocery store, and you would see the National Enquirer there, and there would be 2 stories on that cover. One would be a discussion of possible conspiracies in the Kennedy assassination, and the other would be the latest report of aliens from Mars. So you might find this interesting, that whenever you talk about the Kennedy assassination, people go, oh, you believe in aliens. Where does that come from? It comes from this constant pairing, week after week after week, of 2 things which are completely irrelevant. It's illogical to connect those 2 things. Saying that Kennedy was assassinated by more than one person, and that there's aliens from Mars, have nothing to do with each other. An abominable snowman and all the other stuff, right? And they're still doing that today. So, they've got their own avatars. The negative people. Alex Jones was clearly one of these guys. And everything out of his mouth even though he said some things that were true, he said a lot of things. And a lot of them weren't true. So now you've got this negative avatar upon whom you can project your desire to sort of ignore the reality of the evidence because he said it. Oh, he said it, therefore it's crazy. Therefore, I don't have to think about it. And this short circuiting of thought is a very common thing.
I'm not going to defend Alex Jones here, but I will say when you dive down the conspiracy rabbit hole, you tend to start seeing conspiracies everywhere, and that was his problem. The issue with him has become that whenever you do say something about the Kennedy assassination, whenever you do say something about government, like you can say COINTELPRO, you can say Operation Mockingbird. Those are past events that we have been proven where the government was involved in either invading the Black Panther Party or
Oh yeah,
invading media sources.
all
So
kinds of memos. Yeah,
there's evidence to prove that, but whenever you talk about the Kennedy assassination, people will just go, oh, that's like Alex Jones stuff. And that's the issue, is that now he's become the face of the conspiracy thing, that whenever it's like, it was like calling someone racist at some point. You could just say it and people would immediately just, oh, it's the worst thing in the world. But now there's people have used it so much, it's gone. So it's like,
people want to reduce cognitive dissonance, right? They don't want to believe. They don't want to do the work of figuring this thing out. First of all, I got 1,000 pages in my book. Okay, it was hell to write the book, 2 years, and not so difficult to read it. But let's face it, who's going to read 1,000 pages of the evidence? Very few people. So it's easier for them just to, ignore the whole thing and then say, oh yeah, Alex Jones, nut, go on. And that's why I did this JFK challenge, for exactly that reason. Okay, you want to say that? Fine. Here's $100,000 to maybe change your mind. Read some books for $100,000. How long is it going to take you?
That's tempting.
Let's say it takes you 20 hours. Wow, that's a lot of money per hour. You know,
Did you find any conspiracies that you couldn't get with? Like any of them that you felt like you had to, that was a little bit too far for you?
any conspiracies? What now?
Specifically in the Kennedy assassination, there's a lot of conspiracy theories. And like I said, I agree with some of them, but I don't agree with them all.
Oh, there's a ton that I don't agree with. I mean, like, did Cuba do it? Did Russia do it? Did the mafia do it? There's a lot of ones that I don't believe occurred. But yet, the evidence says that there was a conspiracy, and therefore you have to figure out, well, who was part of this thing? There's only one conspiracy, right? You can have 100 conspiracy theories, but only one of them is true. So you got to figure out what that one is. And therefore, what's the one that's most consistent with all the evidence that's been gathered? And when you do that, there's really only one that's left.
Which one is that?
That the people on the Warren Commission were manipulating the evidence to frame Oswald.
Well, that's a fact. That's not a conspiracy. I meant, like, who do you think did it?
Well, yeah, it's a conspiracy because you got more than one person involved in a crime.
Okay, well, that's legal language style. But I mean, like, when it comes to who took the shot, who do you think took the shot?
You mean the name of the person?
It could be, you could say organization, CIA, FBI, mob.
I don't think we'll ever know the actual name of the person that took the shot, but on the other hand, we know he's a damn good shot. And this guy wasn't using the Mannlicher Carcano. Okay. Um, and there's multiple shots and they all hit. So you had marksmen from the back and from the front. One guy shooting through the front, throat, another guy shooting through the head. And then at least one shot from the back that hit the president, at least one shot back there. And missed shots. There was a shot that clipped James Tegg. And there was a shot that completely missed that another shot. So it's like at least 5 shots. Might have been 6 or 7.
There was an FBI agent that pulled a bullet out of the grass, and then that bullet was never submitted into evidence.
Exactly. I don't even know who that guy was, but there's photographs of this guy pulling this thing out of the grass and sticking in his pocket.
I used to think that it was the CIA that, like, was someone took the shot in that aspect of things, but I think there's more evidence to show that they were just manipulating I guess, or trying to cover it up. I know people think Johnson did it. I don't think Johnson did it. I just see a lot of Hoover's involvement, Johnson's involvement, of Allen Dulles, all these people that weren't really necessarily trying to figure out who did it. And then I start bringing back the example I mentioned earlier about Garrison's attempts to embarrass the agency. I mean, if you have an agency that's trying to defend its credibility, it's like what I talked to with Blakey. When Blakey was talking about the agency, obviously national security interests, John Sunheim also said the same thing. They're protecting the way that they look. How come no Secret Service members were fired? How come there was nobody that, expose any of these things. And we know from Watergate that there was a lot of covert operations that were going on that made the CIA look horrible. So I just start going, I mean, the organized crime aspect. I don't think the mob did it, but if you fought the side of the mob did it, the agency is going to want to protect the fact that they had this
Well, you
relationship.
can't make a clear delineation between the CIA and the mob. They were working together, and that's been documented. To assassinate Castro was one of their plans, Operation Mongoose, right? So the CIA and the mafia were working together. Well, who's to say they were ever that different to begin with? You know, I mean, didn't just wake up one day and go, hey, why don't we just call the mafia to help us kill Castro? Like they never worked with them before. So, I mean, this is a long line. So what we distinguish as mafia and CIA are really just two sides of the same sort of entity, right? And each one doing its own thing because each has its own role to play in this thing.
Like I said, I don't try and nudge it a certain direction to fit what I agree with them all, everything but the official version that it was just Oswald that did it. Now, where I do find trouble is I don't know if Oswald took a shot at Kennedy. I don't think he took a shot at Walker. But if he took a shot at Walker, I believe he didn't take a shot at Kennedy. And that's kind of the part that I'm in now is that I mean, I don't know how his rifle got at the book depository building if they switched it out later. I know there's a 3.75 Mauser that they said they saw. And
Yeah, there was a Mauser that they later changed to a Mannlicher Carcano. All this stuff has been thoroughly documented. But if you want to go back to like, why would anyone think that Johnson was involved? Well, it's pretty simple. You can put it all together. It's like geometry. If Alan Dulles and John McCloy are involved, then clearly Johnson has to have some sort of knowledge because how would he get two co-conspirators on the Warren Commission? He was one who appointed them. And of course, J. Edgar Hoover had to be involved because he's controlling all the evidence. So now you got four different people. And if you just got those four people, because one of the arguments against this sort of master conspiracy is, oh my gosh, you'd have to get hundreds of people involved. Not at all. Not at all. That's the brilliance of it. You don't. You just have to get the head of the FBI involved. And then you got to get two guys on the Warren Commission involved. The two guys who are most responsible for hiring and firing people and telling them what to do and what not to do. Ignore this. Focus on this. Use this. So the FBI is funneling stuff to them. And some people are going through, oh, wow, this is interesting. And then someone like Dulles says, oh, no, don't talk about that. Let's talk about this. Being directed. In fact, some people resigned from the Warren Commission because they didn't like the way things were going.
yeah.
Just like on the HSCA, people resigned.
Well, there's that famous phone call, I think, with Johnson, where he's talking to one of the Warren Commission members. I can't remember his name, but he talks about, I already signed your name up. And the guy was saying he didn't want to be a part of it. He was like, I already announced that your name, you're going to do
Warren.
it.
Oh, Warren.
So, I mean, that the Warren Commission, the craziest thing about that is that as a public, they felt like we needed this elite team, like the A team, like you see on TV, of this blue ribbon committee that comes in and they're going to do the job right. And it's got all the best people and all the best positions in our government, you know, respectable names, Earl Warren, whether you want to say Alan Dulles is respectable, he just has the director status or whatever it was. But there's all these people with a lot of things that add on their resume. And then when this commission gets created, they think, okay, there's this star-studded cast.
Well, you have
Despite the flaws.
four of the seven, in my mind, were two of them were actually really in on it from the beginning. Two of them were Gerald Ford and Earl Warren were sort of like just going along with those other two. And three were not. In fact, the whole single bullet theory thing broke along those lines. And that's where you can see the demarcation. So four of them said, yes, the single bullet theory thing makes sense. And three of them said it did not. So the four who said it did were obviously Dulles, McCloy, Warren, and Ford. By the way, I don't know if you found this interesting or not. I did. You know how many presidents came that were in Dallas in 1963 on November 22nd? Yeah.
Richard Nixon was at a bottling convention.
Richard Nixon was there. George Bush was there. Johnson was there, and Kennedy. And another president, Gerald Ford, served on the Warren Commission. And another president, Ronald Reagan, was actually involved with a lot of the people that were actually involved under the scenes when you start to digging into this thing, the whole California crowd, and some of the interrogation in the Warren Commission was done by these guys in California.
Like I mentioned earlier, I try and find the most plausible thing. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I would be more playing devil's advocate because there's just some things I start thinking about. I go, is it like everybody knew what the real thing was or who the person did it? Or were a lot of these people inside of their head thinking, I have to agree with this because if we let there be conspiracy, we're going to end up in another world war?
Well, I think that latter part, and also just sometimes people have an intuition that they know what they're supposed to say, and then they just say that thing, and they don't ask too many questions. Like they have their suspicions, like Arlen Specter, for example, or Warren, or Gerald Ford. I mean, I don't think that Gerald Ford was actually in on this thing from the beginning, but he certainly was made known to him. Hey, this is the official position. You need to go along with it. And these are people who are just people that follow orders. You know, it's a very military-like structure. I mean, you could see that. That's why they had the president's autopsy in Bethesda. So people were following orders. They were following orders.
We got a
Don't
missing brain.
don't probe here. Don't do this. Don't take this X-ray. Don't do that. Right? You can only do that kind of thing in a military hospital, which is under that kind of hierarchy. So this is a very interesting story. I mean, this opens up lots of cans of worms, this story.
Do you think Arlen Specter knew that the single bullet theory wasn't true? Because I tried to look at his profile. I even sent this. I don't know if you know who Tom O'Neill is. He wrote a book called Chaos about the Manson murders. Well, he ended up getting pulled into the JFK assassination because Jack Ruby's psychiatrist was a guy named Julian West who worked in the MK Ultra project. And that guy, not only was that therapist, Julian West, the same therapist for Jack Ruby before he went nuts. The one that gave him a flu shot, administered a flu shot for walking ammonia, and Jack Ruby said they gave him cancer. I can validate that later as well too, but not the fact that they gave him cancer, but that where he got that from. He got it from, there was a penitentiary. They were injecting people with cancer cells. But that guy, Joyon West, was also the same therapist for Ruby before he went nuts, then the same therapist for Charles Manson before he went nuts, Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh.
Is that right? Wow.
What he found out was through Joyon West and a bunch of stuff where he got pulled into the Ruby thing. And I sent him this email because I needed to ask him about this, which was he was going to meet with Arlen Specter to show him that the single bullet theory, the evidence and the letters, documentation to show that it was created for a reason. And Arlen Specter, that's his whole platform. Ever since he went on to the commission, he based his whole career off that. And he said he was open to anybody that could change his mind. He said this on a Joe Rogan episode. He would listen to any new evidence or whatever. So Tom O'Neill reached out to him to do this meeting to show him this documentation so that they were going to meet. And then last minute, Tom O'Neill canceled. And then Arlen Specter, I think, died like a month later or something like that because he got nervous. He didn't want to give it to this guy and then him blow it on his own and say, here it is, or he didn't know what was going to happen.
I find that story very disingenuous because if you just look at the evidence that was around back then, no one could defend that single bullet theory. It was indefensible from a trajectory perspective.
Well, that's what I'm saying is, did Arlen Specter know? Like, did he get all the
information?
He had
to have known. Okay. He had to have known. There's a photograph in my book. So I don't know if you've seen that famous photograph where they show that sort of like that rod and the rod from the back and the angle of thing. And he's got the thing positioned above the shoulder of the president. And going at that angle, it would then go into the Connolly. But he knew it was wrong because it's a photograph taken from the reverse angle, which they didn't publish. And that was one of the things that came out later, which shows that the hole where the president was shot was about 5 inches below that. You'd have to take that whole rod and move it down 5 inches. When you move it down 5 inches, obviously it's not going to hit in that position, right?
Well, that's what I was mentioning, the fact that that photo came out later after the single bullet theory was created. If you see the pictures of Arlen Specter where he's pointing and showing how like the bullet could have done whatever, if he didn't know that, I feel like they just didn't give him all the info. Because I go, he built his career on that. So if he ended up finding out later, he's going to have doubts about it and he might still double down, but he was open to the idea of getting his mind changed. Like I said, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to understand it from like, I don't think anybody's that good of an actor to be able to be like, oh, it went 100% this way and then deny the facts. He had to still be curious about it later after he created that whole
At
thing.
the moment he was holding that rod in the photograph taken from the front, he was simultaneously aware it was in the wrong position as shown by the photo from the back.
Do you think he was in on everything that they were doing to manipulate, or do you think he just didn't
I
want to look
think
like
he
an
was
idiot?
following orders about the way he was supposed to set this thing up.
That's what I think too. That's what I was trying to get to. Is I think that's more plausible. I don't see our
A lot of people were following orders.
yeah, and it's that
For example, one of the doctors, Humes, burned his autopsy notes, put them in a fireplace. So they did an autopsy of the president, took the notes. There was a bunch of conversations. And then later that night or the next night, I forget which one, he took all of his notes and he threw them in the fire.
yeah. There's
This
blood
is
on it.
this is
I'm kidding.
never
I'm
this
kidding.
is never done.
I
This
know.
is never done. Okay. You never do that. The autopsy itself was a joke. The weights didn't make any sense. How much a liver weighs, how much a brain weighs, none of that stuff made any sense. And there was all kinds of gaps in the data that was put there. And one of the guys in the HSCA, one of the coroners, whoever they had like 12 of these guys. He said it was the worst autopsy he'd ever seen. It was so bad.
I think they said Oswald's autopsy was a lot better than the one that they gave the president.
Yeah. So there's really no argument for Oswald being guilty, as proven in my book. And I'm offering $100,000. No one has ever said yes, and they never will say yes.
Backyard photograph.
Well, I mean, it's manipulated, probably.
I know a lot of researchers are agnostic on it. I
But
say,
again, that it's, it doesn't have anything to do with whether or not the shot came from the front or the back. That's really the key, best evidence, right? You can have 1,000 photographs of Oswald carrying a rifle because let's face it, if he's a communist undercover guy, yeah, he's going to have photographs of him holding a rifle. That's part of the whole thing, right? Alan Dulles wrote a book called, I think it's called Legend, about how you set up these patsies. And the whole, he wrote a book about it. It's what we do. They have a legend. We have a whole story. I mean, it's elaborate what they do. They create whole histories for these people, and they get them going way back in time. They groom them from a very young age to maintain this identity and carry that identity for many years. And now they got these guys that they can use for whatever purpose they want.
so that's the thing that kind of I get stumped at, is that the grooming aspect of things. Even from, I know they had like a
Well,
psychiatric.
Oswald learned Russian, right? So obviously he didn't learn it just like that. I mean, it took him many months, probably took him 9 months. Well, they have this language thing in Monterey. So he had seen some show. I was a double agent or something like it, 1953. Some guy named Phil Brick or some FBI guy, he wrote a story or a TV show or a movie, said, I was a double agent for the FBI. And Hoover contacted the FBI and said, I want to do that. I want to be a double agent. So they got him and they stuck him in the Marines when he was young. I guess he was 16 or whatever he was. And blah, 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 blah. Trained him in Russian. Okay. And eventually sent him overseas to be a double agent, a so-called defector. There's a lot of these guys that they did that with. He wasn't the only one. So it's not difficult to understand when you understand that that actually was the program. And again, this is all in my book. In fact, one of the guys that was in the program filed a lawsuit against the newspaper that said he was an ex-communist turned congressman. He said, no, I was never a communist. I was part of this program. You call me a communist. I was never a communist. I was a double agent. It's in the book.
Well, when it gets to that position, as you know, everyone has their own ideas of where it kind of goes from there. I think that someone was using Oswald's name, especially going around and like firing shots at someone else's target, saying this is what I'm going to do to the president, does not sound like Oswald. Someone trying to rent a car, even though Oswald didn't have a driver's license, it doesn't sound like Oswald. So people are using his name, but people bring in the aspect of an MK Ultra thing. And what I can, and I brought this up with Blakey, was that there was a document about, was Oswald given LSD? And people insinuate as that being MK Ultra. And I say, no, that just shows that more evidence that he was an intelligence asset, because when they would go overseas, they would train these people with LSD to make sure if they were ever caught and interrogated, they knew what that was like, so it wouldn't be used on them, or it wouldn't be effective usage on them.
Well, whether he was given it or not given it isn't really relevant to me as to whether or not, he fired a shot, or whether he was on the 6th floor, or whether it came from the front or the back, or whether it came out of a Mannlicher Carcano or some other weapon. So all that stuff is related to the forensic evidence that's in there. And again, I don't even really think of Oswald, quite frankly. I wrote a book about him.
There are 3 books about him.
Yeah. Just because, just to get what I said in the book is I want people to stop thinking about Oswald. He's just, I call it the Oswald wall. Everyone's talking about Oswald. Let's not talk about Oswald anymore. I've got $100,000 out there. If you think it's Oswald, come get the money. Oh, no one's coming for it. Great. Then it's not Oswald. So let's start talking about who it actually is. And let's get our thoughts in that direction, because that's when it really gets interesting. Then you start to peel the onion off, right? And the threads that you can follow from in the rabbit holes. There's like 50 rabbit holes in the Kennedy assassination. Lots of different avenues and weird connections. Like you just said, Jack Ruby and MK Ultra. Also, Jack Ruby was an investigator for Richard Nixon. Did you know that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah, in 1948. The whole McCarthy thing.
Oh.
Part of the anti-communist thing. So when you start, and George de Mohrenschildt, do you know about George de Mohrenschildt and all the people he's connected to?
Yeah, I've had 2 people on kind of speak differently about George de
I mean,
Mohrenschildt.
he's a very key figure in this.
Yeah, he's
I mean, the
Oswald's
people who's
friend.
connected to him, he's connected to George Bush.
There's,
He's connected,
I'm
and he's
telling you, man, you look through any of the presidents, they all got these weird connections.
well, this guy's connected to a lot of people: Oswald, George Bush, and Jackie Kennedy. Interestingly enough,
Isn't that because of Jackie Kennedy's father or stepfather?
I'm not sure the exact thing, but this was a very tight knit group back then. These people were hanging around each other. It wasn't like a big world. Okay. There's a very small set of people that were connected. Dallas Petroleum Club, D.H. Byrd, all those Texas oil guys were connected. And obviously Lyndon Johnson is really connected to those guys, needless to say. And you got the whole, are you familiar with the confession of, who was it? Listen, G. Gordon Liddy. Who was the other guy?
Don't say James Files.
No, not him. The Watergate guy.
He said he did it, and he was like, I took off
Nah,
my
no, I
scope
don't.
and I looked around, and
No,
then
no,
I
I don't think about him.
okay.
Who was the Watergate guy?
Oh, Howard Hunt.
Hunt. Did you hear about this confession?
Yeah, his deathbed confession he gave to his son.
Well, there you go. So he named names, which I agree with him. I think that those are some of the names. It's not all of them.
But if you trust Howard Hunt, then you get, I mean, what's different from trusting Marcello or someone else on their deathbed who talks about the plans that they had to kill Kennedy?
Because this was a very elaborate plan to frame Oswald, which had been years in the making. And this isn't the kind of work that the mafia is going to be doing. They don't have the manpower that does this stuff, making fake Secret Service badges. You ever heard of Chauncey Holt?
Yeah, the guy, is that the person that was on the knoll or whoever that was flashing a badge?
No. He was a guy that made the badges for
I,
the people that were flashing badges.
I haven't heard of Chauncey Holt then.
Yeah. So, and there's all kinds of interesting letters that came out from him, and then you start to delve into this stuff, and you're finding lots of evidence that you never really knew existed until you start looking for it, And once you start looking for it, it becomes pretty clear that this is a very involved thing.
I definitely believe it was connected. I think it was weird the fact that they had Alan Dulles, who got fired by Kennedy, then assigned to be basically leading. I mean, even though Earl Warren's name was on the Warren Commission, he was definitely doing most of the interviews. Alan Dulles was. He was also in charge of, well, director, I would say, of the CIA, but he was the one that also created MK Ultra with another guy.
Yeah.
So I
And the
mean,
mayor of Dallas was with the CIA at the time.
everyone was either an informant or they knew someone whose brother worked in the FBI. There's all these weird connecting lines.
Exactly. So now the question is, okay, what is this CIA thing? What is it? Because people go, the CIA killed Kennedy. And to me, that's a ridiculous statement. You can't say that 40,000 people killed Kennedy. What you can say, though, is that there were people who were working in the CIA that were involved with the group that killed Kennedy, which meant that the CIA had been infiltrated, just like the FBI had been infiltrated, and the Secret Service was infiltrated, and the military hospital was infiltrated, and that there's this group that's capable of infiltrating because they have the power to do that at that level.
I'm with you. I'm looking through a name book in my head right now, and all I keep picturing is Hoover. Because if you look at like Hoover, and I don't think Hoover's the one that 100%, he didn't do everything, but he did a lot of it. And there was just a lot about Hoover, about COINTELPRO, about invading Black Panther Party, and just so much that he had going on, invading Hollywood, looking for communists. That he had blackmail the Kennedys as well
Well,
too.
he denied the existence of the mafia for decades.
They allegedly had photos of him in a dress. But I think the more rational take is that he went to the track a lot and the mob kind of ran the track and they kind of fixed races for him.
Well, they had a lot of stuff on him. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but a lot of the people who are put in power in American politics have a lot of skeletons in their closet that can be revealed.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Biden
So but you
laptop.
know about the Epstein thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is like part of the operation. Is you put people in power that you can then sort of hold something over their head, and that's how you maintain your power over them.
Well, that's like a fraternity. It's why they had like the Bohemian Grove thing that was labeled a conspiracy for the longest time until someone got a video of people in there eating, dinner and having these giant
Oh, but
banquets.
gosh,
And
there's so many of these things: Trilateral Commission, Council of Foreign Relations, Davos.
it's what Joe Green calls the weirdness. And I'm like, what is this weirdness? Like, there's a lot of that. Apparently, what is it? George Bush's grandfather stole Geronimo's skull or something like that in what is it? The Skull and Bones Society.
Oh, is that interesting?
So it's like it's every president has something weird about them that does something.
Well, a lot of these people are connected to the same group. I mean, we had one election where you had two Skull and Bones members running against each other, Kerry and Bush.
I didn't know Kerry was a Skull and
Yeah,
Bones member.
yeah.
Do you think that they do that like so they get dirt on the person? And then, it's like failing upwards. If you do something bad or you take the rep for something, then you kind of fail upwards in a sense. You get promoted because they got
Well, I
more
guess
dirt on you.
the significance of the Epstein thing was showing that lots of people that you thought were opposites are connected to this guy, Clinton and Trump, opposites, and Prince Andrew. What's he doing there? I mean, all these people are connected to this one guy. So, like, there's a lot of things going on that we're not necessarily aware of. But, the Hunter Biden laptop thing shows that there's a lot of hidden information that you were not aware of.
I think you can even clear that with a past event as well too. If you look at the number of scandals that Johnson had before Kennedy died, and then when he became president, all the scandals just stopped. I mean, there was
Exactly. I think Billy Bob Estes, is that the guy's name? Yeah.
Bill is the first name, I think it is, but
Yeah.
those
I
scandals
forget
were.
the name, but Kennedy was going to expose that. So after the election, they were going to dump Johnson, and then they were going to go after him. But he never got the chance to do that, obviously.
Because I think a lot of people say that's why they part of like the evidence to say that to support that Johnson did it. But I also think like when it comes to the media, I mean, the media is not going to talk shit on the acting president. I mean, it's even weirder if they're still talking about like a potential vice president
And again, I don't think that Johnson was necessarily the initiator of this thing.
he definitely was part of the cover up.
He was, well, he was in on what was going on. but he wasn't part of the team that was strategizing this thing and making stuff happen behind the scenes. This is a very elaborate thing. I mean, you had like a radio show that Oswald was on. Remember that Oswald was filmed handing leaflets?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there's a TV camera there. It's like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Oh, and by the way, he's also on a radio show. Oh, that's interesting. So now you got a video, you got audio.
Well, look at the number of people in those interviews that he had where he was claiming he was a patsy and he was being charged with killing the president, but they didn't have evidence on. The cops even said they didn't have enough evidence to get him on the charging of killing JFK, but they had enough to get him on Tippit.
Yeah, I don't think he had anything to do with that either, but
I don't think that, like I said, there's like 3 different shootings that they have his name pop up in. I don't believe the Walker shooting because there were 2 witnesses there. It doesn't fit the statement of a lone nut. Um, or even if you believe Oswald was a lone nut, it doesn't fit the official version at all either. But then if you get to the Tippit part, I mean, they were blaming him for killing a cop, and that's what people like the people that said they didn't know Oswald, but they worked at the book depository building. I mean, half of those people weren't going to want to be associated with a cop killer, and that's what they were being told was that he killed a cop, not that he was the one that killed JFK. It didn't come out until later.
well, I mean, so this whole thing is like, again, I think completely orchestrated for all these purposes. And the main idea, the thing that made my book possible was that Oswald was not killed when he was supposed to be killed. I think he was supposed to be killed at least 3 separate locations.
The theater, one of them.
Yeah. The first place was in the actually right there in the Texas School Book Depository at the bottom floor where the vending machine was. That I think that guy was supposed to kill him. He just got cold feet. He said, I'm not doing it. The second place was supposed to be at the Tippit location. I think that Oswald was supposed to have been killed by Tippit or one of these other people, and they got cold feet. And then the third fallback was at the Texas Theater, and they got cold feet. And all of a sudden, now they're in trouble, the people who ran the show, because now they got to walk back their story. The original story was he was a lone nut, and they had the 3 shots and blah, blah, blah. Now they had to plant evidence it was more than 3 shots. And that's what my book is about, because there's another line of evidence that's there. There's 2 separate lines of evidence to cover this situation. Then after he was killed, they could then go back to the original story, except now they had all this stuff that they had planted saying, well, there was actually 4 bullets, right? So it's all very interesting stuff.
I definitely think Dallas police involvement as well too. The reason why is like they just had this person get dropped into their custody, and in that 48 hours, I mean, they had one person that was supposed to, I mean, they had 4 people
Oh,
around
there's
them.
2 guys that were clearly involved in some way. One's Carl Day and the other was George Butler.
But I think a lot of that is because the corruption that was going on in Dallas. I mean, the fact that the Warren Commission said that Jack Ruby didn't know any Dallas police officers.
Well, I
And
mean, but again, you got to go like what is really going on in that Dallas Police Department? What are they really doing? Who are they really working for?
and they didn't bother protecting Oswald as much as they should have because of the fact that now that they have the FBI and a bunch of other people, media coming around, snooping around because the alleged killer of the president is in their midst, that's going to open up a lot of eyes into maybe some of their extracurricular activities.
Yeah. So
I,
again, the more you dig, the more you find.
I think the theater would have ended differently if Oswald would have actually been able to fire that gun that he had, or the one that they said. I mean, if there was a shot that was fired, they could have just shot him dead right there. But the fact that the gun didn't fire, then he allegedly took a punch. You know, that just goes, okay, shit. Now we got to take him. I mean, even in the pat downs that they gave him, the first one, they find nothing on him. I think it's like I don't think they find anything on him. Then the second one that they did, they find a bus ticket, which is missable. It was in a shirt pocket. But then they find 6 revolver bullets, which is just like, what the how do you miss 6 revolver bullets? So either someone lied about patting him down the first time or someone planted those things on him. And that's from Bart Camp's work, who specifically focused on that 48 hours.
Yeah. Well, the more you learn about this thing, once you see the analogy I give in the book was, let's say you're in a store and someone comes and hands you a counterfeit bill. Then they hand you another counterfeit bill. And then they hand you another counterfeit bill. Okay, now they hand you the 4th bill. What are you going to think about that bill?
It's a counterfeit.
So once you get enough counterfeit evidence, and you don't have to see a lot of it, Once you see enough of it, you go like, hey, I don't trust any of this stuff. I don't trust any of it.
I agree with you. It's just about how do you get people to care about it without rolling their eyes and saying conspiracy. I mean, even I think that if we get whatever's unreleased still left hidden and the answer comes out, and if it's completely the opposite of the official narrative, are people really going to care, or are they just going to move on after a
There's
week?
nothing that's hidden that, in my mind, that is going to move the needle one way or the other more than it already is right now. The needle's already where it needs to be, as I demonstrate in the book. You don't need any more evidence, and any evidence that really showed who was really behind this thing was never ever produced anyway. There's no written documents. No one's saying, "Hey, this is what we're doing." No one's going to do that. It was oral, verbal, and the planning was all verbal, and no one took notes. So there's nothing's going to come out. Um,
Now, when you kind of dived into all this and you wrote your books on it, did this change your opinion of the government? I mean, do you start looking at everything that's kind of told and kind to see if there's another angle to it as well too? Because for me, it's like you step on one crack, you end up feeling like you're stepping on
I
a
don't know
crack
if
every
it.
single time
I
you
don't,
take a
wouldn't
step.
say it changed my opinion as that it reinforced my opinion to a much greater degree than it previously had been.
So were you kind of always kind of a little bit skeptical of the government?
Well, when you go through Watergate, you immediately are skeptical. When you have Vietnam War, you're skeptical. You're already skeptical. So it's like, well, what's the latest lie? You know, there's really nothing to believe. There's no history of them telling the truth. So, again, if someone passes your counterfeit bill a few times, it's a counterfeiter. So the main thing I got out of the book was, wow, this is a lot worse than I thought. I didn't know it was this bad.
I would think that with the number of independent sources that we have now, which makes it so hard, that kind of exposes a lot of the issues with the main narrative. I think everyone kind of, if you weren't on the Democratic side, but if you just heard about the Biden laptop thing, you were able to send a link through. I had, when that came out originally, I was sending links to a bunch of people. And like I said, I'm not Trump or Biden, but I believe in the deep state aspect, which keeps me on the part of looking at corruption on either side of it. But people were rejecting to look at it if they agreed on that side, or people were trying to find Rumble and other sources to be able to talk about it, which I think a lot of people know that the government is not giving you the full story, but it's about getting them to care about doing something to try and change that as well too. I think that's why I get addicted to the Kennedy
Yeah,
assassination.
people are overwhelmed now.
It's too much.
I mean, you got 650-page report on that Biden laptop. Who's going to sit there and read that? Who's going to read my 1,000-page book?
I'll read it.
People are they're swamped with this stuff, and they don't have the time for it, and they don't have the critical thinking abilities to process it, and they don't have the will to process it. They got their lives to lead, you know? So that's what's going on.
Do you know Vincent Salandria?
Yeah.
When I there's a film, Max Good, when I had him on my show, I've seen his film, The Assassination of Miss Payne, and he had Vincent Salandria in the beginning. And I like Vincent Salandria, but what he was saying, I go, for anyone that doesn't know anything about any of this government stuff, this is the worst thing to do. It's because they're not on his level. They're not there. And that's the thing is like when I get talking with you, we can talk about COINTELPRO, we can talk about Operation Mockingbird, we can talk about all this, and it's normal. But if you try and say it to someone who has never heard of this stuff, has not looked into the history books of all that, they're just like going to be like, that sounds conspiratorial and walk away. So it's like, how do we just show them that it's relevant, it's relative to what is going on today?
Well, so let's go to that whole again, the short circuit. It's like Hulk think. The word conspiracy, wrong. I mean, it's like a short circuit. Conspiracy, wrong. What I would say to those people is name crimes that are not conspiracies. Most, if you look at like in terms of dollar volume, most crimes are conspiracies. Drug smuggling, the porn industry, or whatever they're doing, hiring people to kill people, car theft rings, cryptocurrency things, ransomware attacks. They're all conspiracies. Very few crimes are not. It's rare. I mean, a guy sees his wife and, whatever, and he shoots her. Okay, not a conspiracy. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the financial crimes, and the drug-oriented things. And by definition, those are conspiracies, and they're all conspiracies. And antitrust and companies colluding and OPEC and cartels. The word cartel is a conspiracy. There's conspiracy all over the place. Counterfeiting rings. And in fact, lots of convictions for conspiracies. Lots of people in jail for conspiracy.
Well, a lot of people in jail for things that necessarily aren't even accepted today. I mean, even when the polygraph test came out and Jack Ruby was shouting, give me a polygraph exam and all this type of stuff, there's a phone call that we have. You can look it up on YouTube. It's Johnson and Hoover, and they're going back and forth saying, yeah, he demanded for a polygraph test, but I wouldn't trust those things for shit. Like, that's what he says. And it's like, take that back to the time that happened. The government knows it's bullshit, but the people think this is real. The people that are requesting to be given one to see the truth come out, and they think so. They're obviously going to be convinced at that point. It's like, what is it? Placebo effect. You're going to probably get a more accurate answer, but they knew it was BS. Neutron star activation, BS. Blood splatter analysis, BS. The Innocence Project has exposed that. It got a bunch of wrongfully convicted people out of prison. So you start entering this world of, like, when we say the forensic evidence, I don't know. I get it. The whole trajectory, angles, all that. There's still people out there that believe the magic bullet theory, and that defies gravity. I mean, that defies so much. I think the only rare occurrence I've ever heard about a bullet is two bullets colliding into each other, and we have that in a museum. So this one, I mean, there's more fragments of bullet fragments in Connolly's leg, I think, than there is in the actual parts that are missing out of the magic bullet.
Exactly.
But people accept it. So it's like, at this point, it's like you either have to suspect that they're an agent, or you have to just suspect that they don't give a shit. And that's like the hardest part.
Yeah, they don't know enough, and they won't either, because it takes a certain amount of, it's like lifting weights. It's a certain amount of like pre-work you got to do to get to this level. There's a certain amount of understanding you have to have. And like I said, I've got 1,000 pages in my book, and that's just scratching the surface. I mean, there's probably 100,000 pages of stuff you have to read to really understand this thing.
Well, it gets into an area where you have something like the Disinformation Board that's going to help save your mind and save your kids' mind by banning disinformation on the internet. And that, to me, I'm like, it's like Google saying, don't be evil. Like, we're going to limit certain things you can find on the internet to
Well, what
save
they
your
call
kids.
disinformation is actually information. They just got their words mixed up.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that what are they labeling misinformation or disinformation? I mean,
The stuff that they don't want to be published.
capitalist relationships. I mean, if you talk about the basic stereotypes, big business, big tech, big pharma, people know about those.
New
But
York Times didn't publish anything about this Twitter release of the Hunter laptop.
I doubt, because probably they have a good relationship with whoever's involved.
So, I mean, so if they're not publishing what's normally, they're always talking about what's on Twitter. Musk did this, Musk did that, blah, blah, blah. They're always doing that. Here's like the most important story that's ever been published on Twitter this year, which is how they colluded with the Biden campaign to withhold this information. And again, I'm not a Biden guy or a Trump guy or anything. I can't stand any of those guys. But it's all about, what's in those laptops is stuff with Ukraine. That's the important stuff to me, because now we're talking about involving United States in a war.
Yeah.
And if this war is precipitated by some sort of hanky-panky going on behind the scenes with money laundering, and Biden and his son are involved in that, then everyone needs to know about that. It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat, Republican, whatever. That's a story. And the covering up of that story is another story. And the release of this information on Twitter, not covered by the New York Times, is a story too. Why aren't they publishing that? Why aren't they talking about it?
Because it hurts their interests. It's going to only hurt them.
So now you know how the Oswald thing worked out. So if these guys are part of that team, there you go.
Did you look into like the Mar-a-Lago thing with Trump?
No, I don't really think about that guy too much. I can't stand him. I can't stand Biden. I
I'm
don't
not
think about any of those guys. I mean, they're just,
I normally don't either, but when they put up that picture and it said all those secret documents on the floor, and they took that picture. I just got a flashback into my head of when they had the 3 bullets sitting in the book depository building, just perfectly placed on the. Because like I'm like, what the like? It says secret right over the top of it, and you can tell because they gave you a close-up shot of it. And I'm not saying he's being set up. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying there was some. It makes me trust media a hell of a lot less. I'm very skeptical whenever they
To
say
me, it's
something.
just professional wrestling. I give it the same amount of consideration as I do, what happens with the great Malenko versus Dusty Rhodes. It's all set up at the beginning. They actually follow scripts. And in this documentaries, they're actually reading from the script.
It's white
Hulk
papers.
Hogan, like, this is what I'm going to say tonight. This is what I'm going to say. It's right there on the paper. So why would I pay any attention to it?
Well, then I mean, because it's involved in everybody's face.
Well, the real answer is, why are we letting the professional wrestlers run our country?
That's a good question.
And who's the Vince McMahon behind our country?
I don't think that
And
any of those.
WWE writing the script.
Well, like I said, I don't think any of those people are actually running the country. I think you got big capitalism and a bunch of other business interests that are long
Well,
ingrained
there's
into this.
clearly coordination done at the Davos level. They have all these contingency plans and these sort of what do they call these things, where they run their playbook. They've got their playbook. They tell you what their playbook is. You can see it. It's written down in white papers about what's going to be happening in the future and how it's going to happen, Great Reset and all that stuff. They're telling you what they're going to do.
Well, if you look at the timeline of events that have happened to us recently with the whole pandemic and everything, and then you look at the timeline of events that happened when the Warren Commission was just creating new theories and creating new things to pile on to bolster up their point of the single bullet and the narrative of Oswald, you start going, at this point, it's like they don't care to be caught. They're just going to see how much shit they'll shove in your face and see if you accept it or not. And it's really sad how people, a lot of people, at least more than, I wouldn't say the majority, I would say probably believe that there's conspiracy in JFK, but enough people that are actually talking and doing something about it besides just moving on to their day. And that's what's crazy, is that when you let them go unchecked for so long, that's when you start seeing that at this point, they'll just do whatever because they don't think you're going to catch them, or they just think you don't care.
Well, I think you're seeing right now in China, sort of like the end game, which is how far can you push the people? And when they start to revolt, it's used as like a thermometer for these guys of, okay, we know we've reached the limit. Now we're going to back off a little bit. And it's sort of like working out a master plan for how you can get the maximum amount of control. And what's going on over there is absolutely nutso.
Well, I mean, it happened here for a brief amount of time. We had lockdowns, and
But you notice how
eventually,
it went away faster.
well,
But over there, it's still going on, and that these guys are like,
at first it was 2 weeks to be inside of your house to slow the curve, and then it became, I think it was the second month, and then
well,
eventually people are like, we're
they've been
losing our
flattening the curve
business.
in China for 3 years.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that they open it up saying we're going to let you go back because we got to restart the economy. But at that point, if you look at everybody that was already getting fed up with it, they just kind of, it seemed like they were doing you a service of saying we're going to open back up, but it wasn't that at all. It was because people were done. They were ready to go back to work. They were going to do it on their own, and they didn't care what you said about it. And it's that aspect of, we're going to give you the idea of your own freedom and choice, but we're giving that to you. It's like we already were out the door. You just said, hey, I'm coming with you at the last second.
But here we have a history of independent thinking, and we call it freedom. Relatively speaking, it is freedom compared to a place like China. Over there, they haven't had that. They've had the opposite.
They were getting welded in their house.
Have you seen these guys standing in the snow to get a test?
What?
Yeah.
Wait, what? I have not seen this.
Oh no, to get into a factory, you have to take a test, and it's snowing, and you will see people standing in line, like 5,000, 10,000 people standing in line in the snow, waiting to get their test, where they stick a thing in their nose and then go in the factory.
There's a video that you can see. It was a girl with Tourette's, and she's like doing this Tourette spasm, and they're trying to stick the Q-tip up her nose to do the whatever the thing is, to do the COVID test. And it's like they would get right under the nose thing, and then she would jerk her head back and then jerk forward. And I'm like, What's the damage if that, like, she does that when you're doing that and you just hit something, it hurts something or breaks something, or I don't know, does anything that can cause serious
And they
damage?
have these quarantine camps over there, and they've had like drones doing flyovers of these things, and
Well,
they're
that's in Australia.
massive.
Australia, they got that too.
In China, yeah, massive. And these little cubicles where they stick people.
Well, see, that's the weird thing is when I dived in, and like I said, won't go too deep into the COVID thing, but when I talked to someone from Australia and I'd be like, "You guys have camps over there. It's like a little vacation spots." He goes, "Yeah, but you guys wear masks." And we're like, "What?" And you realize we were doing that and they were doing something different, but it's where we're, I guess, located. It's like how every country sees another country a little bit differently. That was horrible and shocking to us, but then shocking to them was masks.
The whole so now taking this all Kennedy assassination stuff, the connection to that is if someone is running the show like Vince McMahon behind the scenes. You ever see The Wizard of Oz? You know, the
Yeah.
guy behind the scenes, right? Or The Prisoner, who's number one. If someone is actually doing that and writing a playbook for us with geopolitical moving chess pieces around, um, they're using nations as laboratories as to what they can get away with.
To me, it's pretty shocking when I start talking to someone from the UK about the Kennedy assassination who researches into it, or just from another country, and then it's so average to them, like the idea of conspiracy, and it's only like only in the United States, conspiracy has become this word that means dumb, throw it out, it's useless.
Yeah, well,
It's
they haven't been brainwashed like we have.
well, that's what's crazy is that they know over there. It's some people you can say it's real legal language. I've said it multiple times on my show in the past, but it's just trying to get that in that brainwashing or whatever you want to call it. And I mean, I talk to academics as well too, not just Kennedy assassination people. And whenever I go, yeah, yeah, like brainwashing, and they're like, "What do you mean by brainwashing?" And I'm like, "Well, advertising is brainwashing."
They're the
Like, I
worst
mean,
anyway. By the way, 9/11 is the same thing. Overseas, most people know what the score was on 9/11. Here, it's like, oh yeah, these guys flew into the building, and these 19 guys, and with the knives, and they did it.
well, it's the double standard thing I don't like, which is when it comes to the 9/11, if someone who's not attached to the 9/11 situation, they go, "Oh, 9/11 was a conspiracy." People will go, "Shut your mouth. You're a horrible person." But if the family members say they want a second investigation into it, everyone goes, "Okay, okay." And they just stop. And that's the same thing with JFK. JFK, Martin Luther King. If you say Martin Luther King was killed by the government, people will be like, okay, they're not going to argue it. But JFK killed by the government. You are a liar. You're a conspiracy theorist. You're all, and it's like, where's the double standard on this? It doesn't matter. It's just power. If you have power, you're going to abuse the hell out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, you can say this to people. Just give them a little simple true false question. 9/11 was a result of a conspiracy, true or false? If they say false, all you got to do is go, you are completely wrong. It is 100% certain that you are wrong. And do you know why that is?
There's more than one
Because in
person.
the official story, there were 19 people involved in this thing. And whenever you have more than one person involved in the criminal act, that's a conspiracy.
Do you
You
think?
had 2 planes flying. That's a conspiracy, folks.
Do you think that they shot one of the planes down?
Actually, it was 3 planes. 3 planes. 4
Yeah.
planes.
Do you think that they shot one of the planes down?
I don't know, but the point is that you can't deny it's a conspiracy when you got 4 planes involved.
I read Cheney's biography, and they were talking about when they knew one of the planes was hijacked. I guess after the first plane crash or whatever, they started going, "There's another plane. One's flying over the White House." And there was a plane that was headed over the White House. And they were like, is it coming straight? They thought it was coming straight to there. And Cheney gave the shoot down order. And then the Secret Service guy runs out of the room, comes back in like 10 minutes later and goes, "Sir, it's still coming over here." And he goes, "I thought I told you to shoot it down." He put this in his autobiography. Um, and the guy hesitated on it and the plane just flew over. It wasn't hijacked. And then you get to the other flight that crashed in that field. And I go, did they shoot that down? I mean, how else do you get parts that were falling miles or miles before the actual landing or hit spot is, right? So maybe someone didn't hesitate. And you ask questions like this, and what I would say is that's reasonable thinking if you see evidence that obviously someone was giving the order before on a whole different plane, and people go, "No, that's conspiracy." It's like, well, then you can't question anything.
But it is a conspiracy by definition.
I know,
I don't know.
but
I don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, it's a conspiracy. Yeah. It
Well,
is.
so the word in I guess the difference is what people say call it conspiracy is that they're thinking fantasy, and it's a really
Well, they
smooth
should
way
they
they got
should
that in.
learn the English language,
Well, that's just how the news is going to keep telling them that
but
it's
they have to have
conspiracy.
critical
So,
thinking abilities. Let's use words the right way. It was a conspiracy. Now, the question is who's involved in that conspiracy? Do
Bush,
you think it was just those 19 people?
Bush.
So, well, or maybe not even those 19 people. So, it could be the whole Oswald thing. We got ourselves a patsy here, folks.
Well, that's
So,
what I think a lot of people that just choose not to look into it is that they believe if all this stuff kind of they start learning about all this or they start agreeing with all this and all this comes out later, is that they're just going to live in a world of hell where everything's evil. I was like, you already live here. You just don't know about it.
well, they prefer the life of illusion.
Sometimes that's an easier life.
Ignorance is bliss.
But I'm not happy with that. I rather people go like, you talk about the Kennedy assassination, you must be a miserable topic or something like that. I'm like, no, I'm actually it's pretty interesting if you really start kind of looking
I
into it. I mean,
totally agree with you. And that I think is a differentiator, a demarcation between certain kinds of minds. Some people, if you had evidence that they had cancer, say, I don't want to see that evidence. And other people go like, give me the evidence, give me all of it, because now I can deal with the thing. Show me the x-rays, show me the lab results. Now I can deal with my cancer. Okay. If you're hiding stuff from me, I'm finished. But some people don't want to know they have cancer.
I think eventually it all I forgot who said it, if it was Penn Jones or John Judge that talked about it all boils out. Like it's the JFK assassination is all going to come to the forefront eventually. And we've seen that over the past 60 years. It's all been slowly boiling. New documentation's been coming out and revealing more and more and more to get us a better historical record. But also, I feel like if it all does come out, how are we going to teach the historical record? You got to rewrite the history books. Are they going to do that? Probably not.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to have to get control of your government. Revolution 2, Second American Revolution,
You can't say that. YouTube will flag that too. You can't start
Oh, I didn't say
uprising.
that.
Yeah,
Oops.
don't say
In fact, I actually have to go now. So
that.
this would be a good breaking point, right? Before they pull me.
Nah, I
So,
appreciate you, Barry. Is there a place where people can find any of your links?
well, if you put the link to my book, it's a PDF. They can download it for free in your description.
I'm going to make sure I link it all in the description, Barry. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for listening to this episode.